comparisons are also problematic for the other laws. No. The one big argument would be, how you get out of that conundrum is to say, well, listen to me. The other 9 commandments come back in the New Testament, and the Sabbath does not come back. So I suggest that we start the discussion from there then. So don't bother with the whole heap of text about law and grace, Old Covenant and New Covenant, law and faith, law and works. Don't bother with those general texts. Let us save the hours of discussion and come down to the simple arguments that would advance the case. So after all, the tons of arguments and the whole of books that have been written on this issue, we only come down to a few issues. One, let me tell you how I would defend Sunday. Let me change it here and tell you how I defend Sunday now. When in this part of my thing, I go and be a Sunday man. If I were defending Sunday, so I defend Sunday. I wouldn't bring all of those general arguments. Last week, I enumerated the many arguments that why people don't keep the Sabbath. Let me go over briefly some of the arguments people don't keep Sabbath. It was only given to the Jews. The Sabbath was a part of the Old Covenant. The Old Covenant is abolished. The Sabbath was a part of the temple and sacrificial system. The temple and sacrificial system is abolished. The Sabbath was a part of a system of works. We are under grace. The Sabbath was not of faith. The Sabbath was really impossible to be kept anyway. The Sabbath was ceremonial. It's purely ceremonial. We keep moral laws. Don't kill, don't commit adultery. These are moral things. These are not ceremonial, like, observing, sunset or whatever. A ceremonial. The Sabbath was not universal. It was given to a particular people. It doesn't apply, around earth. It doesn't apply because everybody in the world can't keep Sabbath at the same time. Sabbath come one time. In fact, you can't have 2 Sabbaths. If you're flying, you can't run into 2 Sabbaths in the same day. So it's ridiculous. So the Sabbath is ridiculous. That's that argument. One, the Sabbath has been replaced by Sunday because Sunday is the day of resurrection. So, therefore Sunday is the day that we should celebrate. We should celebrate not the old creation of Genesis, but the new creation in Christ. And the new creation is celebrated by Sunday, when Jesus was resurrected. These are some of the major arguments for the observance of Sunday or the discontinuity of the Sabbath. Jason was reason last week that it's not clear in the New Testament where it come back, and because it's not clear, anything that is defined as sin must be clear, and we're not sure that it don't go on with sacrifices, that it don't go on with circumcision, that it don't go on with the requirement for the red heifer, all of these things. You cannot use the argument that the Sabbath was only given to the Jews. It is not a strong argument because all the laws were given to the Jews. Not just the Sabbath. All of the laws were given to the Jews. And last week I pointed out to you, I think I gave you Psalm 147 and Deuteronomy 7, Ephesians 2. To point out that all of the law, in other words, God only had a covenant with one nation. He was only dealing with one nation, therefore it's only one nation get all the laws. So when you come down and you start to argue with a Sabbath man, and you say, boy, you're not keeping the Sabbath because it's given out to the Jews. It's a weak argument, and it is historically misguided. It shows ignorance because all of the laws were given to the Jews at a time when God was only dealing with one nation. No. An argument that especially Jehovah's Witnesses use is that the Sabbath is tied to Jewish history and tied to bondage in Israel, in Egypt, and they quote Deuteronomy 5. When you go to Genesis 2, you see that the Sabbath was created from creation. This is very important. I recap for those who are not here and also re-emphasize those who were. Let us look at the origin of the Sabbath. Let us go to the beginning to study this issue. When the Sabbath was established, there was no Jewish nation, there was no temple, there was no tabernacle, there was no old covenant. The Sabbath was prior to all of that. Indeed, Jesus would say the Sabbath was made for mankind, and not for a particular nation. You cannot therefore come with the argument that the Sabbath is peculiarly and exclusively a Jewish institution. It is rank historical heresy. Patently false. Because Genesis 2 shows you. Verse 1, the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God finished his work and rested on the seventh day. I want to tell you something about this Genesis 2. And I come to it as someone who spent a lot of time studying philosophy and logic and rules of logical thinking. If the text had only said that the Lord finished his work and rested on the Sabbath, the case for the Sabbath would not be as strong. Because I could say, if I were a Sunday keeper, the writer was merely stating an historical fact that he done the work on the 6 days. And because he never have no work on the 7th day, that 10th day marks the rest. I want you to follow me carefully and logically, It was not just that God rested on the Sabbath. Sometimes I hear Sabbath keepers arguing as though it just have the kind of rest. No, it's not just the kind of rest on the Sabbath. Because if I were a sharp Sunday keeping man, I wouldn't let you get away with that. And you're a lot of Sabbath here and come and talk with it alone. Not just. Because I could say the simplest reason why God rested on the Sabbath, the time work done. So there was no significance to the Sabbath. It work done. God did more than just rest. He rested from the work which he had done, so God blessed it. So it was not just a resting. There was a blessing that was done of the Sabbath. A blessing that God had put in the Sabbath. Now God put that blessing in the Sabbath before there was an Israel, much less an Israel, to go into bondage. Is it not therefore ignorance or disingenuousness to quote me Deuteronomy 5? Therefore you must keep the Sabbath because you were slaves in Egypt. And then to ask, well, we weren't slaves in Egypt, therefore it doesn't apply to us. When God blessed the Sabbath, there was no Israel. There was no old covenant. In fact, there was no sin. There was no sin, so there couldn't be any sacrificial system. There couldn't be any Levitical system. There couldn't be any temple system. This Sabbath was created before even the sin came into the world. Two institutions God created in creation. But there are two ordinances. Two sacred institutions God brought into being at creation. Marriage and the Sabbath. Creation ordinances. Eternal. Till death do we part from them. So people don't believe that to the first part. The two parts the world reject. It is very important, therefore, when studying Sabbath, to go back to first mention. Before we clutter the arguments with a whole heap of things about law and grace and things. Go back to the original establishment of the Sabbath. When the Sabbath was established, there was no Jew man or Jew woman. There was no special nation. So don't give me the impression that the reason why God created the Sabbath was because the children of Israel were in Egypt and they suffered and he gave them that as a typology, as a symbol of their release. No! That is historical amnesia.